Agenda is current business, discussing and possible action on the following: a water service area plan in response to the City of Waukesha letter. That's the letter dated April 25th. We are now in receipt of an opinion from Attorney Lang, one of our attorneys, which has made clear that the town of Waukesha has no binding contract with the city and never did. According to Attorney Lang, the town's motion was indeed flawed. The board made an incorrect assumption based on flawed information, and we need to look forward to the protection of town assets. On Monday, April 22nd, the agreement that was made between the DNR, Sewer PAC, the city, and town officials was to exclude the town from the water service area if the city was unsuccessful in obtaining a Great Lakes water diversion. Further, the city has agreed to abandon all shallow aquifer wells located on town lands if they are successful in obtaining Great Lakes diversion water. The city has also stated that they would be willing to sell the Lathers property back to the town upon a successful application. The last time we met here on the water service area plan, the issue was raised that the town was not mentioned in the plan. The fact is, no other communities that are in the plan are mentioned, and that's because the DNR and Sewer PAC look at the water service area plan as a region and not as individual communities. Muskego and Mukwonago are indeed mentioned, as those communities have wells that can be referenced for the sake of comparison. Oak Creek, Racine, and Milwaukee are also referenced as potential water supply sources. But again, no other communities in the water service area are mentioned. Also mentioned at the last meeting here were temporary point of entry treatment systems, or POETs. These are systems connected to individual properties for treatment of contaminated water sources. While a suitable interim correction, the DNR has determined that POETs are temporary and would not be allowed as a permanent solution. For those that have said accidents are unlikely, I would ask that we recall the January 6, 2007 incident here in the town when rail cars were sent off the tracks. Luckily, only grain was spilled at that time. Or the April 2nd, 1982 incident when rail cars were sent into the Vernon Marsh in another rail accident here in the town. Or on June 11, 1973, again at the Vernon Marsh, when rail cars were again sent into the marsh. Accidents can and do occur right here in our town. The Village of Jackson accident spilled only 55,000 gallons of fuel. We have many times that amount each day traversing through the town daily on both rail and our roadways. Next, the present contamination of the aquifer does exist as we sit here right now. Our own experts have told us to count on that contamination to get worse. We have been advised by those same experts to be part of the water service area. We have all contributed to pay for that advice. Are we now going to ignore the counsel we received because it doesn't align with our personal beliefs? We are representatives of the majority and not stewards of the resources and assets of the town. The majority spoke on April 2nd. We are turning down a free insurance policy. There's no forced connection. If you don't want to connect, don't connect. There's no forced annexation to get those services. There's no fee for the infrastructure. All of these assertions are in writing. If we would find it more cost-effective to connect to a future system in Big Bend, our option is open there also. Opting out of the current water service area is free, has no strings. This is all about options. The desire to be in the water service area plan is being driven by residents just like you and I. Most of the folks we've heard from here tonight and in previous meetings are residents just like myself, not the Belinskis and the Bellmans of the world. I'm not the well-connected, rich land developer as I've been portrayed. I am, like all of you, simply a concerned resident. The only land I own in the town is the land that my home sits on. As has been stated in the past, annexations are now at a feverish pace because of the water service area plan. This is not a border agreement with Waukesha. If it were, what would we do with the border agreement for the village of Big Bend or the city of New Berlin, who also share our borders? I, along with the majority of town residents, implore this board to reverse the previous decision to exclude the vast majority of the residents from the option and the right of a secondary water source and accept the last and final offer that the city of Waukesha made to us on April 25th.
Mr. Chairman, I seek recognition. I have a motion to offer. In fact, I have it typed up, so I'll pass copies down the table. And My motion is as follows. Regarding the Waukesha Water Service Planning Area, I move to accept the terms as set forth in the letter dated April 25th, 2013 from Edmund M. Henschel, City Administrator of the City of Waukesha, to the Town Chairman and Supervisors of the Town of Waukesha, including acceptance of the, quote, planning area, unquote, as defined by the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission in their letter dated December 23rd, 2008, as it pertains to lands that are located in the town of Waukesha, and I so move.
Is there a second? Well, I'll second it. Discussion?
I'll offer two pieces of information. A letter on April 25th provided by Mr. Henschel that, Brian, you've referenced in your motion, offers the town of Waukesha basically 20 years of tax levy at its current rate as it goes into the city through annexation. Earlier during citizen comments, a number of properties were referenced, anglers, cluts, etc. These are agriculturally zoned property at a minimal tax base. We would get that minimal tax base on a 20-year payment. The rest of this letter really offers the town of Waukesha nothing. If I was to go chapter and verse through their letter, it basically says, we're gonna follow the state statutes for annexation, great. We'll pay you 20 years as item number 2. The city of Waukesha says, hey, we don't have to pay anything if we don't go into the service area. That's a statement of obvious fact. We may review the letter of intent from their supplier, which was Oak Creek. Great, we've done that long ago. They're in agreement that we won't be encumbered or bound by economic or social development requirements. That was specifically put in there at the time that we were negotiating last year, before the letter of intent was provided, because the city of Milwaukee has incredible social, economic impacts, including housing, transportation. We would have to provide low-income housing, multifamily housing, public bus, train routes, all things that the town physically could not do, and those things were removed by this. They're not getting it from Milwaukee, so this is another moot point. The city of Waukesha on item number 6, they're talking about we can either buy the water on a retail or wholesale basis. Again, a statement of obvious fact. If we were to get water, we have that option whether we wanted to open up a public utility and buy that water as a wholesale client, or if we said to you as residents, hey, if you want the water, you hook up and you get the bill direct, we're not getting involved. Item number 7, which is the last item that is a condition here, they're gonna put in writing the exact amount of water that they were going to give to us. And the reason that that was a conditionary piece is because in one letter they told us it would be 1.1 million gallons per day. Then they sent correspondence to us that said, no, it's actually only gonna be 550,000 gallons per day. They couldn't figure out which one was which, so we wanted to know, hey, really, what is that? So when you look at the document that the city has given us in way of protection, what we're really talking about is basically saying, hey, come along with us, we'll bribe you, we'll give you 20 years of your current tax base, and that's it. There's nothing in here about the shallow aquifers, there's those high capacity wells, there's nothing in here that protects the town should they not get Great Lakes water. This is a generic letter. The second thing I'd like to point out is that we sent just on Monday, right, we made a motion and we said, and I'll read the letter as it's addressed. Dear Mayor and Common Council of the City of Waukesha. These are the elected policymakers for that municipality. I have not seen on their website where the Common Council has held a meeting. So if the Common Council has made the decision to reject this offer, they would be in violation of state law for open meetings violations. This was not a letter that was addressed to staff personnel at the city to customarily say, I won't present this to the Common Council, I won't present this to the mayor for consideration. I believe the policymakers in the city are the people who were voted for. And if you look at this letter and you look at the 25th letter, we asked for a shared revenue agreement. A shared revenue agreement by state statute infers that they will agree to pay us something, a la, they're already at the 20-year tax level. That would need to be a shared revenue agreement. They couldn't just arbitrarily, hey, we're gonna pay you. We'd have to have a shared revenue agreement. Whether that is where I think the number should be or where they think the number should be, that's why this letter says we should engage and enter into a shared revenue agreement. The other thing that this letter says that this one does not is about the development. And in the first item, I said that the city and the town shall enter into a development agreement. Now, my view of a development agreement and their view of a development agreement may be very different. But I would ask you this. If you want to maintain your private wells and you think that it is reasonable that if you care for your well and that you take time to make sure it's working properly, update the pump, do your testing, shouldn't you have a voice to say, should a benzene plant be developed on 164? What if a benzene plant goes in there and spills? What if, since we're big on what ifs, like in Jackson, what if the city develops a pipeline and puts a pipeline down 164 and that pipeline leaks, as happened exactly in Jackson? We would have no say, according to their letter, about any development that would go on in the town of Waukesha, and that very development could be, as you've stated, many accidents can happen, could be the cause of those accidents because we didn't have a say. And they wouldn't be concerned about our water needs because that isn't what they're focused on. So my question to the rest of my board is, we sent an offer letter to enter into a discussion with the Common Council and the mayor. Based on town records and my discussions with two alderpersons, that has not occurred. Two people, Common Council, said they don't have this. So if they don't have it, how in the world did the city of Waukesha tell us, sorry, no deal?
I can answer that. They said, sorry, no deal, because they have a negotiation team. That negotiation team is authorized by the Common Council to make decisions. And they said, no deal, Joe. Joe, you are well aware that in the meeting on April 22nd, that the city has agreed to abandon the shallow aquifer wells if they're successful. That was the basis for our conversation, that was the basis of the meeting, and that was the basis of the agreement that you agreed to before we left that place. That was the reason we called Dean Lang and asked him if that would be permissible. We're not going to have any control or any say over what type of development occurs on 164 after a lot of these annexations take place, regardless.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I could just, and Joe, want to address you in the comments you made, paraphrasing a bit, but at the beginning of it, you spoke about, I believe, the Engler property, or Jerry Engler property, and about recompense to the town for loss of tax revenue. In my concern is, and it's crystal clear to me, we wouldn't be talking about Jerry Engler's property, we wouldn't have a letter from Rick Hayes, and all these kind of people, were it not for the fact that this town board, by the position it's taken on January 24th, is forcing people to flee the town of Waukesha. That's the bottom line, folks. we're forcing people out and then trying to talk about how we argue over the spoils. That's silly. What we need to do, and this board needs to take a posture, is to try to encourage people to remain in the town of Waukesha, to develop in the town of Waukesha, to prosper in the town of Waukesha. If they need municipal sewer and water in order to do that, there's a way to make that happen. It's regrettable that in the past 2 years plus that negotiations haven't yielded something more fruitful, but we're at a crossroads at this point in time. The jig is up, folks. And I am, for one, sick and tired of taking postures where we're forcing people out of the town of Waukesha. I want to put the welcome sign out on Front Hall here and tell people, we want you in this town, we want you to remain, and stop trying to force them out of our community. That's the bottom line.
And to that point, I'd just say, this letter was sent to the city in light of, we were gonna put the entire town in. So who's forcing them out? Or is somebody forcing them in? Because for the city to say no to this, all this is about, if we really say, well, geez, we need to care for my neighbor and make sure that my neighbor has water. If that's what they're gonna say, then what's wrong with sitting down and having a development agreement to give the town some say in how the community around us is developed? If it's all about just having safe water, what's wrong with saying, okay, we'll jointly work on a shared revenue agreement with they can't say that they're factually just absolutely opposed to, because they are already at a number of 20 years of shared revenue. We can discuss what shared revenue should be, but they're there already. So really, the only thing we're saying is we'd like to sit down and talk about creating some joint development. Maybe that joint development is identifying a corridor in which the city has a say and we have a say, and we work on that corridor together. That could have been possible. But I'll say just one last thing, and that is, residents have sat and come here and have said, holy cow, what about our water? And I would say this to largely this side of the room. If the city of Waukesha doesn't get Great Lakes water, guess whose water they want to use? Ours. I don't think that the city, through all the planning that they have done and all the money, the millions of dollars, what have you, that have been claimed to be spent, that they didn't look at our supply of water and determine that it was adequate, our safety of water, our contamination rate, and determine that it was the best possible source, secondary to the Great Lakes. They passed up on riverbank inducements, which were suggested by scientists. They passed up on the water that's existing in Oconomowoc, which is viewed as a very large pool of water. They've come to us and said, we're gonna take your town water. They mean it so seriously as to have spent $500,000 to purchase 14 acres with the intent solely of putting water on that property and taking that to use that in the city. So when somebody says, hey, we're gonna run out of water, hey, our water is contaminated, I wonder, why does the city of Waukesha not agree with that? Why wouldn't they be looking at a different plan B if our water is so bad or so dangerous or so limited?
Joe, no one said we're gonna run out of water. What has been said is that we do have contaminated water in the aquifer. That has been proven by test results that have been done by independent testing labs that are state certified.
Do you want to put those test results up there and show them to the residents?
They're on the website, and you have them, Joe, and you've held them in your
I
hand.
certainly do have them. And they, let me tell you about Dan Dubniak's water results. He highlights them and sends them over as if they're.
Joe, I'm gonna cut you off here because right now, the town of Waukesha has been threatened with a potential, defamation of character lawsuit because of your portrayal of Mr. Dubniak in the test results. So if you want to talk about something other than the test results and that you think they've been falsified or manipulated, talk about something else.
Okay. Nothing else.
Nobody's saying we're running out of water. The fact is that the aquifer is contaminated. We have the test results. All the people out here have the test results. All the supervisors have the test results.
Rhonda Voles and the DNR have offered to come in and do a seminar for any town residents that are interested to discuss exactly Mr. Merrick's previous comment about the likelihood of our contamination in our well.
Rhonda Voles will no longer speak with you. You're not allowed to talk to anybody at the DNR because you twist their words, Mr. Vansky. You're only allowed to talk to Eric Ebersberger. That's a directive that came down yesterday. Rhonda Voles will no longer have conversations with you.
Well, then she violated that today.
Perhaps.
Mr. Chairman, if I could address a couple of issues. First thing, I want to be clear about it. There are clearly different points of view, different visions by people on this board. I don't presuppose to speak for any of the rest of you, but I'm going to tell you what I think we're all at. I don't think there is anybody that I know of on this town board. I don't know anybody in the community that I have talked to in the last 2 years that is interested in having the city of Waukesha have easy or difficult or any kind of access to town of water Waukesha, shallow water, high capacity well aquifers. This is a separate issue, I think, and let's maybe see if we can have 5 people agree on something. If and when that day comes, and if they're successful in their Lake Michigan diversion, which we need to try to support them in that endeavor, that's in our best interest to have them succeed. If they do, that issue goes away. And there's no guarantee that they will be. If they are not successful, I, for one, am ready to join that fight to protect our town water. I will stand shoulder and shoulder with Chairman Merrick, with you, Joe, with you, Larry, and with you, Mike, assuming that you'll stand shoulder to shoulder with me on that issue. That's not what we're talking about, folks. I'm going to read the last sentence in the second paragraph of the letter of April 25th, 2013, just a week old, from Edmund Henschel, and I'm going to read it twice. It says, if the city is not successful in its application, the town's approval of the water supply service area plan and the conditions outlined in this letter are null and void. If the city is not successful with its application, the town's approval of the water supply area plan and the conditions in this letter are null and void. That has not changed since the former town board, of which I was a member, and Mike and Joe were. We put that condition in our first letter to the city on September 18th, 2012. If they're not successful, all of this goes in the circular file, even though that letter and their responses are now null and void. That condition, that provision, understanding has been there all the time. So for that sake, any discussion about lather property, wells and everything is not a subject for tonight. The whole issue, as far as I'm concerned, we had a drop dead date of April 30th, which we have exceeded, and some have said, oh, those dates can be pushed, be pushed, be pushed. I think we're against the wall on that. We're totally against the wall. Do I wish maybe we would have a better deal? Sure. But at this point in time, from my perspective, a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. Let's get on with it.
Anybody else?
I still believe that we are in total control as of January 24th. I am not part of that fear smear campaign that existed very strongly over the last 4 or 5 months. Most of the smear has gone away, but it appears very obviously that the fear factor is certainly part of this program. One of the citizens made a comment earlier in respect that this isn't our problem. Our water works. This is the city's problem. We, in the best interest of the total town and not selected groups of the town, for lack of other words. This board made the proper decision after looking at it for a year and a half, possibly two, okay? Why, I question myself as to why I'm even here. Are we going to be coming here once a week to discuss the water service area when this is, pun intended, water over the dam? Thank you.
Mike, I guess I'd just offer one comment about this is not our problem. I could largely agree with that, but what we're talking about is this is our and our future generations of town residents' potential solution. That's the difference.
Brian, would you think that a potential solution to water issues could be handled like they're handled in the McGuanago area or in the town of Brookfield?
Don't understand your question, Bill.
Well, out in McGuanago, they have municipal water provided from the very same aquifer that we are in. If you go to McGuanago High School, you can see right in their backyard pump station number 4. They pump water from the aquifer that we're in and distribute it to their residents, to their customers, in a localized fashion. They're able to filter out contaminants. They have to meet the exact same standards that any other municipal water supply source has to meet. They're able to do that. So wouldn't we, when you ask, do we have a backup plan, wouldn't the town of Waukesha be able to manage a backup plan very similar to what McGuanago, town of Brookfield do? Not feasible?
Yes, it is feasible. We could do that. At what cost, Joe? How many millions of dollars do you want to spend on a water supply, on the wells, on the purification process, on sewage treatment? It's there for free for us now. Why would you spend the millions of dollars?
Free.
Free.
Yeah.
You gotta be heard. Live in the city.
Move to the city, city water.
Should we take a vote?
Whatever you want to do.
Unless anybody else wants to talk, who hasn't been heard yet? Larry, you got anything to say?
Heard enough.
Chairman Merrick?
I guess I will say one thing. I don't know where the confusion came across, but last Monday we agreed that everybody but Brian was gonna see the letter that was sent to the city. And I learned about what was going on 1 o'clock Tuesday from the paper. I never saw a document. It was agreed that you wouldn't send anything until all of us sent and agreed to have it sent. And I didn't see a thing except for in the newspaper.
Nothing was sent, Larry. The newspaper sent it to the city long before we had an opportunity, and they turned it down long before we had an opportunity to send it to them. There was no need to send it.
So you're saying the letter was not sent by you or by the town in any official way to the city?
I did not send it,
Did the town send it in any capacity to the city?
not that I'm aware of.
Hard to find out.
It was sent by the newspaper. The newspaper had a copy of it that night. It was not changed by our attorney.
Well then,
Other than the first 2 paragraphs in the letter, Joe, that were false because we never had an agreement with the city of Waukesha. Other than the first 2 paragraphs that your attorney, whom you rely on so stringently, said, we have no agreement with the city of Waukesha. Other than those 2 paragraphs, nothing was changed, and the city said, non-starter.
okay. I was told factually by Erin Dowdle that you instructed her, even after being questioned about this particular motion, you instructed her to deliver the letter via email to the city. Are you saying that that did not happen?
I don't specifically recall, Joe. Could it have been sent? Sure, it could have been sent. What's the difference?
Well, the difference is the truth.
And the difference is, I like to hear it before I hear it in the newspaper, since I'm sitting on this board.
The newspaper had it the night we were here, Larry. Did you want us to close it off from the press and have more secret meetings in this town?
Comment to Larry, that was a Wednesday at 1 o'clock. I had a
Oh.
resident call me also. I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. Journal Sentinel had a bid on it. I think the direction was real clear Monday when we left here, that our chairman was to escort this letter down to the city, and apparently that got circumvented. That is a thing I don't appreciate. If we agree as a team to have things done in an orderly fashion and know what's happening, it's just, I can't understand why it didn't get done that way. It was just by design or for whatever reason I'm not understanding. Thank you.
Vote?
Chairman Merrick,
Yes.
Supervisor Bansky,
No.
Supervisor Wolf,
No.
Supervisor Laska,
No.
Supervisor Fisher.
Yes.
Motion fails.
At this time, I'd like to make a different motion on this subject, and that would be to reaffirm our letter of April 29th and request that the mayor and the common council have opportunity to consider our letter and provide feedback to us. That's my motion.
I'll second for discussion purposes. Here's a concern, as I understand it, again, I haven't been much involved in it. I have the copy that I walked away with from here on Monday night of the letter about which we are speaking. Go back and you can look at Mr. Ham's YouTube things. I, on several occasions, expressed the concern about the first 2 paragraphs of that letter. And those of you who were here would remember that, and the members of the board, because that keeps repeating in there that there is an agreement. And Joe, you made that representation to us that you had reached out to Dean Lang, and he told us we had an agreement with the city, and you conveyed that message to us. My understanding, and I've got the email trail of that, I believe Molly forwarded that Monday evening yet to Dean Lang, and I saw that he responded and asked for the backup letters that are referenced herein. The November 8th, 2012 letter from the city of Waukesha to the town, among others, and that he came back, and we can read into the record, and probably we should, his response to that, and he basically concludes and says there is no legal binding agreement between the parties, period. In fact, I'm going to read that because it needs to go into the record. Here's what Dean Lang said. I'll trace the whole thing for you. Anybody who would like a copy of this is welcome to see it. It begins Monday, April 29th. Molly Romer, who was here acting in Jamie's stead, is our clerk for the evening. At 7:57 p.m. Monday night, sent this email to Attorney Lang. Attorney Lang attached is a letter to the city of Waukesha for your review that was drafted and approved by the town board at this evening's special town board meeting. Please email me and Aaron after your review so that we may forward it to the board before John signs the letter, before John signs and the letter is delivered. That was all exactly according to plan. Dean Lang, Tuesday morning, April 30th, the following morning, 8:59 a.m. Back to Molly with a copy to Jamie and to Aaron Botto. Please provide me with a copy of the city's proposal dated April 25th, 2013, which is referred to in the first line of the attached letter. Also, Please provide me with copies of the November 8th, 2012 document from the city and the January 24th, 2013 document from the town referred to later in the first paragraph of the letter. Thanks. So that's 8:59 a.m. Tuesday, the day before yesterday. A very prompt and dutiful response at 9:40 a.m. Tuesday. Molly Romer, back to Dean Lang, copy to Jamie and copy to Aaron. Good morning. Attached are the documents you requested. Please let me know if you needed anything else. That's from Molly. So then Dean Lang, who, Joe, we know you have incredible respect for and have voiced many, many times in a public forum, writes back at noon on Tuesday. So this is all transpired in 16 hours of time. And he writes back and says as follows. Listen closely, please. This email will confirm my comments to John Merrick during our telephone conferences this morning. The city's November 8th, 2012 letter sets forth the terms and conditions of an offer made by the city to the town concerning the Waukesha water service area. At the conclusion of the letter, the city states that, quote, we ask that the town reply to this offer by no later than December 1st, 2012. The town did not reply to the offer by that date. Instead, on January 24th, 2013, the town board held a meeting at which it unanimously passed a motion accepting the terms and conditions of the city's letter, subject to two conditions. Number one, quote, to include the demand allocated for the town of Waukesha in the Great Lakes application in the amount of not less than 0.55 million gallons per day, and two, quote, to delineate the water service area based on the attached map, unquote. In his second paragraph, Dean Lang goes on to write, under principles of contract law, the city's letter was an offer, which must be accepted as to all of its terms and conditions, with no conditions thereto prior to the date noted therein. The acceptance must be an exact match to that offer. That did not occur. As a result, the city's offer was withdrawn and could not be accepted after December 1st, 2012. In addition, although the town subsequently accepted the terms and conditions of the city's offer, the town placed certain conditions on its acceptance, which under law is deemed a counter-offer. Since the town's counter-offer was never accepted by the city, there is no legally binding agreement between the parties, in my opinion. I repeat, since the town's counter-offer was never accepted by the city, there is no legally binding agreement between the parties, in my opinion. So Dean Lang basically wipes out everything you put in the first two paragraphs of your letter, Joe. And my deep concern about it, and we can get into it, us as members of the board rely upon representations that people make to us, and we're making important decisions here. When you represented that Dean Lang indicated we have an agreement with the city that's in place, either one of two things has to be true. Either Dean Lang, when you talked to him, was singing soprano and decided to start singing alto. That's a theoretical possibility that he did a 180. Or you misrepresented, misunderstood what it is that he told you. That bothers me deeply. So we can get into a big kerfluffle here about what happened to the letter. The fundamental problem is the representations that we made, and I supported the release of that letter Monday night to let it move forward. But basically, we've got an absolute mess on our hands because he completely counters the representation that you made to us Monday night, upon which members of this board Not I, but some of the members of the board believed in your representations. That's a big problem.
And I'll address that problem. And had, prior to this letter being released to the public, had we had the opportunity to share this with Dean Lang, I think his opinion would have also changed. Dean Lang points out that in the original offer letter, the offer was to expire on December 1st. That is an offer. There was a amendment to that offer that was presented to the town board. That is confirmed in a different correspondence with the city than the ones that Dean Lang has referred to. Additionally, he refers to the fact that we added 2 conditions. Those conditions would be that we said to delineate the map, to instruct that map to be drawn, and to include the particular amount of water to be shared with us. That information was conveyed to them and was memorialized in writing, and in fact, in that correspondence, there is a discussion about them preparing, them being the city, preparing a draft document to lay that all out on one piece of paper. That was done on January 31st. So I'm not gonna say that Dean Lang is going to say that that constitutes a contract or not, because I've never had that discussion with him. I think that if we wanted to die on the mountain of, is the January 24th acceptance a contract, which you and I agreed that just on Monday, that it wasn't a mountain that we wanted to die on. But if it was, I would say that since we made the vote on January 24th, subsequent to that vote, there was a conversation that took place with the decision makers, including DNR and the city, and that conversation was placed then in writing, memorialized, that Dean may conclude that in fact we have evidence to prove that the offer date of December 1st was in fact extended to us, and that the conditions that we placed upon that action were found acceptable by the authority of the city of Waukesha. So, but I don't wanna get into the kerfuffle with you about it, because I think that it's not something, if you brought tonight and said, hey, let's go get the city with this contract, I'd probably tell you that it isn't worth the attorney's fees, so.
I want to make it real simple, Joe, real simple. And the last point on this, Dean Lang, and again, you have praised him in the past on many issues for his legal knowledge and legal expertise. His letter says, his email communication says, there is no legally binding agreements between the parties. I agree. My question to you, a real simple answer. Agree, disagree, or you don't know. Real simple.
Personally, his letter does not take into context the email which I'm speaking, the extension of the offer, which I believe could, I'm not saying would because I don't know, I haven't talked with him, could alter his opinion, because it's certainly, his letter stipulates the December 1st date as one of the reasons that he is concluding that there is no contract. If that date is extended, and there is evidence of such an extension, clearly then that is no longer a reason to state that there is not a contract. If the conditions that were placed upon the motion were in fact accepted, then there, again, the contract, I believe, would still be in place. But it's not a contract that I think that I have an appetite to go get an attorney out.
Last question, can I mark you down as an I don't know?
I guess you could, because I don't pretend to know until I would give Dean all of that information.
Okay.
Quiet.
And sure.
Joe, you paraded that letter around for the last 3 months, saying Dean Lang tells us we have a valid contract here. Dean Lang tells me this is a valid contract. When did Dean Lang see that letter?
As I discussed it in the town board meeting, I said, Dean Lang and I had a conversation. I asked him questions. I said,
They provided us a letter. We accepted that letter. I believed that we accepted that letter without adding conditions to it. Dean and I have a difference of opinion. I acquiesce to his opinion that those two are conditions, but I also feel that Dean should get the whole story at this point and say, okay, if those are conditions, Dean, and if the December 1st, I didn't consider the December 1st deadline a concern because I had the knowledge that it had been extended, as did the other board members when we took the vote that it had been extended. So that wasn't a concern to me to say, oh, hey, Dean, it expired. And I didn't believe that the conditions were conditions, and I still believe today that the city actually, even if you want to call those conditions, actually accepted them, and that's memorialized in writing. So we can continue to attempt to discredit me and say, oh, you made misrepresentation about what Dean Link said.
But you did.
That's your opinion. I mean, you also said that, Aaron, that we as a town didn't officially send over the letter, only to later say that actually we did send over.
My mistake. I just got a note that, yes, in fact, she did send a draft copy after they had
You
already turned
instructed
it
her
down.
to, of course. you sent.
Do I need to make a motion that we send a letter to the city of Waukesha that says we need 3 days to huddle with our attorney? Is that the next motion I need to make?
Let's vote.
Let's vote.
What's the
So
motion?
is that the, I sent Alice your motion, just to make sure.
My motion is that we reaffirm this letter of April 29th, and that we ask the people it was addressed to, the mayor and the common council, to consider this letter and consider sitting down with us to talk about the shared revenue agreement and the development agreement.
So let me ask you so we can straight on. And I am considering supporting your motion. Are we basically going to, so we don't have to dig in that ditch anymore, can we basically get rid of the first two paragraphs?
The letter that was sent from Aaron to the city, as I understand it, was sent removing the first two paragraphs. So I would say that that was supposed to be the official town letter that was sent
Okay,
over.
and I don't have a problem with pushing that formally, but here's the issue. I don't think we're going to get a development agreement, a revenue sharing agreement with the city. I mean, those things take time to work on. Would you be willing to consider if they made a commitment to embracing that conceptually and working with it? Would that be good enough for you?
Without mixing words, Brian, I've been trying to get and include the entire town in the water service area and accomplish three things. If we can accomplish those three things, I have said in front of Dan Dukniak and Ed Henschel and Steve Crandall, as well as the DNR and Sewer PAC, that I would support such an action. I have never changed from that position, and I won't change tonight, that if we can accomplish the three things I'm trying to get done, I absolutely support putting the entire town in.
And all I'm saying is, if we, and I know that's going to perhaps rise and fall on the language, but if we can get a commitment from the city that we can judge to be a good faith commitment, a sincere commitment, and I realize that's got a measure of judgment with it, to embrace those things. Is that something that you'd be willing to consider?
Yes.
Okay.
For me to embrace a commitment from the city after 2 years of haggling this, pretty far-fetched. No way will you get my support.
Well, I'm going to support Joe's motion. When we vote, you can expect to hear me vote yes.
Just to clarify for the motion, are we using it with the commitment we would need to amend that motion, if you're going to do so.
If Brian has some language he'd like to suggest, I'd
And then
consider
vote.
it.
Bansky, did you?